Russian Jack. Here in Anchorage, there are several prominent places with that name. A street, park, apartment complex, post office, even an elementary school.
So you might assume this Russian Jack guy must have been a pretty good guy, huh? Well, as author Laurel Bill tells us in this week's Storytime with Ann Phil, turns out this early settler was initially a bootlegger and was once convicted of manslaughter.
In the 1920s and 30s, several of Anchorage's future prominent citizens moved to town.
Yeah, a crop of folks Alaskans can be proud of, and Laurel, some maybe not so proud of.
A lot of recognizable names started showing up during that time period, including Polish immigrant David Green, who started a fur shop. In fact, my grandfather from Hope sold him furs back in the day. You also had John and Marie Bagoy, and they built a greenhouse and started supplying the community with fresh cut flowers and vegetables. And then Robert Atwood, a young reporter, came to town and fell in love with the local banker's daughter, Evangeline Rasmuson, and got married. Then he became the editor of the Anchorage Daily Times. And then another fellow showed up in town. His name was Jacob Marunenko, but he was more commonly known as Russian Jack. Now, he left his wife and two small children in Ukraine to come to the last frontier to homestead. He changed his name to Jack Marchin and began operating the Montana Pool Hall at 436 4th Avenue.
And he made quite the living making moonshine?
Indeed he did, at an illegal still on his homestead, which was about 3 miles east of the center of town. And some of Anchorage's most prominent citizens were some of his best customers, too.
So now we understand the bootlegger part, but murderer as well?
In winter 1937, he attended a party at a nearby cabin where violence broke out. And Jack ended up shooting and killing Milton Hamilton. Now, Russian Jack was a man of medium stature, and he told the court that it was self-defense because the taxi driver was trying to choke him to death. Well, the jury found him guilty of manslaughter, but they asked the court for leniency in the sentencing. And some sources said that the taxi driver actually needed to be killed. But anyway, the judge ordered Jack to serve 2.5 years at a federal penitentiary in McNeil Island, Washington.
So a lenient sentence for sure, and one that he didn't even serve in its entirety.
He only served a portion of the sentence and came back to Anchorage, and it appears that Anchorage residents forgave him over the years because in 1948 they nominated him to be the king of the Mardi Gras for the 1948 Fur Rendezvous. And then that same year, the city took title to his 320-acre homestead. It turns out Russian Jack was not an American citizen, so he had put his property under the names of a lot of his friends, and so he could not prove up on the land. So today we have a sanctuary, a golf course, and a ski trail site at what is known as Russian Jack Springs Park.
Russian Jack would eventually become a citizen in 1954 at the age of 70, and he later moved to California and died in 1972 at the age of 88 years old.
Yeah, and late Alaska historian John Bagoy did arrange for a headstone to mark Jack's grave in Arvin, California, near Bakersfield. So who knew? Things will be a little bit different the next time I'm at the park or at the elementary school doing a Teacher of the Week.
Not too far from the station.
Yeah. All right, and then next time, in Storytime with Ann Phil, next week we should say, Laurel, she's going to give us a history lesson on the Eskimo Scouts, the Native Alaskans who came out in droves to provide Alaska with a line of defense after the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941.